comes to the movie The Monkey, I'm going to be 100% honest and say I thought it was a really good watch. Firstly, I just love the comedy that we get in this film, whether it be the dialogue, which I will say was a huge contributing factor, but it's the violence and the gore that really was the huge element this film needed. It made me laugh so much because of how graphic yet hysterical it was. And then speaking on the violence, it was an aspect I was really looking forward to seeing, and boy did it deliver. It was grotesque, it was disturbed at times, but honestly, it was also very funny, and I'm glad that it really pushed that envelope of being so uber violent, it's hysterical. And the creativity we see within the murders needs to be talked about. And now there's elements that, when setting up these kills, they're quite predictable, but at the same time, the way it goes from the setup to the end result, there's a beautiful creativity with it that you don't mind how predictable it is. It's just beautiful to see it in a disturbed kind of way. I really enjoyed the villain of the film, the monkey itself, as you never really learn much about the character. You don't know how they got their powers, why it never stayed dead, why is it killing only certain people. You have so many questions, and I kind of enjoy the fact you don't really get many answers from the film. And then I enjoyed learning about the characters and after their interactions with the creature, and how after interacting with it, it really ruined their family, it destroyed them essentially, and then because of what happened to them as children when they're adults, at least one of them keeps an arm's length distance away from the people he loves, as he doesn't want them to go through such horrors that he did as a kid. Now when it comes to the ending of this film, I'll be honest and say it wasn't the most climactic, but it was uber violent and hilarious. Yet I did feel a tad disappointed that this film doesn't really have a good ending. We don't see the villain really being defeated, and the good guys don't get that good win either, as death is still occurring around them, so it does feel a bit disappointing. Nothing really got resolved. Now when it comes to criticisms, I do have a fair share of them. Firstly, there is a revenge twist in the film, which I just felt it lessened the whole idea of this film, as it takes away the mystique of who is causing all this violence, and it's just a simple sibling rivalry that caused this, and you think it'd be something bigger than that, at least in my eyes. My second critique is I felt that when developing the characters, they did an okay enough job of fleshing them out, but when it comes to the adult side, I just think they didn't do a good enough job of diving deeper into them, learning about their personalities and reasonings behind their actions and why they're like this. It would have been nice to see something that makes him feel a bit less than a 2D action figure. And then from a plot perspective, I felt a bit disappointed. Again, from the beginning part, I really enjoyed the build-up, but it's again the second half of the film. I felt they were just jumping from rope to rope, from scene to scene, somewhat going by each murder, not really having a clue as to the end result, and then the somewhat twist that gets thrown in disappointed me as an audience member, if I'm being truly honest. Overall, I think the film, from a comedy perspective, executes it fairly well. It is a hilarious film, but from a story perspective, I think it just lacks that hooking edge that Stephen King stories are known for. And for all those reasons, is this film good? I'm going to be honest and say it's decent. It's a 7 out of 10 for me. Would I rewatch this? I'm going to be honest and say maybe. Again, this film is hilarious, and because it is a Stephen King film, there's bound to be references to his previous work, which I would definitely look forward to seeing, but I'm in no rush. Now when it comes to recommendations, I do enjoy Stephen King's work. The first book I ever read of his was Nightmares and Dreamscapes, a very haunting but eye-capturing book, just loving the story and appreciating how he writes. I love both the book and film of The Dead Zone. Whilst in my opinion I think the book is better as you're able to explore the characters more, I think the film did a great and faithful adaptation of the book. That can't be said for my next recommendation, which is Needful Things, which is my favourite Stephen King book, but also my favourite book of all time, and the adaptation is disappointing. But when it comes to great adaptations, I would say Stand By Me needs to be appreciated more. I just love the whole idea of this story, as they dive so deep into the characters, even though it's based on a short story. I just think they executed it amazingly well. I think Shawshank Redemption needs to be talked about as well, and whilst I personally think it's a tad overrated, I can't deny how much of a great watch it is. But for me, my favourite prison story that Stephen King wrote is The Green Mile, and I thought the adaptation was amazing. I felt like it was more in his wheelhouse, as there's a bit more mystery and emotion to that film compared to Shawshank, but that's just me. Now when it comes to his TV shows, my personal favourites are Castle Rock Season 1, as we see that it's a universe where all of the Stephen King stories are true and set in this world, and they just do a great job of creating this show and creating that world. And I think Season 1 is great. I have attempted Season 2, but I need to go back. Another show I would say is 11/22/63. It's one of my favourites. I loved the concept of a man going back in time to stop the Kennedy assassination, and he has to stop in the late 1950s and live his life in those times, and I just found that fascinating. I was enthralled by its story. And then lastly is The Outsider, which is a great TV series, a very limited one, and you never quite know what is happening until the very bitter end of the series. And then my favourite Stephen King adaptation is Cat's Eyes. It is a film where it's based on 3 short stories of his, which I don't think have any connection, but they do in the film, and that's all through a cat. We see that this cat interlogs into 2 of the stories and then has its own story at the 3rd and final act. Honestly, I really appreciate this film, and it's one of my favourites. Those are my recommendations. This has been my review for the film The Monkey. If you have enjoyed, please like and subscribe, but most importantly, thank you and have a nice day.